Hello, good morning, and welcome to the Abuja Center of Signature Morning. Look at the watch, little bit behind schedule. And again, for how many days you've not seen us? Can we say it the way we said in this part of Nigeria? Long time. No see. Not to worry, we are back, and we are back in full force. My name is Mwabozen Joko. By the way, today is Workers' Day. I was just telling my guest, whom you meet presently in the studio, that this is just 1st of May. April had just passed, and this will be 48 years of my being in journalism and broadcasting. I joined Radio Nigeria in April of 1977. Can't you see? Those who were born that time have become grandfathers, haven't they been? Well, this morning we're looking at competitive politics in Nigeria. What has gone wrong? In the course of this conversation, we're going to define what we mean by competitive politics and what has gone amiss. And my guest this morning is Prince Chinedu Obi. Chinedu Obi is the national chairman of the National Rescue Movement, one of Nigeria's political parties. Chinedu, you're welcome to the program.
Thank you, Chief, for inviting me, and I'm honored to sit beside a veteran.
Well, Chinedu, I'm going to be very unkind to you this morning, in the sense that I'm going to use you as a guinea pig to vent all my frustrations.
You're welcome, sir.
Thank you. Looking at, let us define competitive politics. And pardon me, let me go back a little bit in history. In the First Republic, there was the NPC, the Northern People's Congress. There was the NCNC. There was the Action Group. There was the People's Redemption Party. It wasn't People's Redemption Party, really. It was Northern Progressive Element, Northern Elements Progressive Party, NEPU. Now, I want you to look at these parties. No matter how political historians have said that they were regional parties or they were tribal parties, each of them had a driving conviction. Let me pick the party that I was sympathetic about, NEPU, where Aminu Kano, whose party eventually became I remember where Uchichukumerija and Co. eventually lodged, People's Redemption Party. That party became the People's Redemption Party. It was driven by the emancipation of the Talakawa. There was nothing else that defined that party. In a feudal system where there were underdogs, the landless Hausa community that took on the Islam of begging, that were encouraged to shun education, that were denied opportunities in northern Nigeria, NEPU resolved that the Talakawa had to be emancipated. NEPU pushed for land for the Talakawa, education for the Talakawa, opportunities in northern Nigeria for the Talakawa. So it had a conviction. The NPC was trying to create a northern bloc, driven by some religious sentiment. But let me tell you, Sardauna, who was leading the NPC, insisted that education was key to the emancipation of northern Nigeria. But it was the North, for the North. The Action Congress, it was Action Group in Western Nigeria, was convinced about two things. One, education, agriculture, onto industrialization. Educate the people, overproduce in agriculture, kick off industrialization. Zix NCNC, taken over subsequently by Emu Akpara, was convinced about trade, capitalism, And that was why Zik built Africa's first emporium in Onitsha. Even before any ideas of United Arab Emirates. What am I trying to say? Each of these parties had a conviction. Don't try to call it ideology. That becomes intellectual. There was something they stood for. So, there was competitive offer. If you wanted to be capitalist-minded, go ahead with NCNC. If you wanted to be progressive onto agriculture, industrialization, and free education, go for Action Group. If you wanted education for the North and for the North, you go to MPC. If you wanted the emancipation of the Talakawa, for goodness sake, go to NEPO. Chinedu, that's what I define as competitive politics. Do you have competitive politics in Nigeria today?
Thank you very much, Chief, for
I had to take a long time to lay the ground.
Yeah, it was good you did that. Let me thank you for the opportunity to join you in this conversation today. And to also say to you, I am not the guinea pig, because I share your frustration. And I agree with you that politics has moved away, unfortunately, from the ideas. And I thank God the references you're making are local references. You're not telling me what happened in the US. Is something that had been practiced in this country. Yes, competitive in a multi-democracy, a multi-party democracy, the word is competition. Because what do you sell? The values that distinguishes you from the other party. Is that exactly what we have today? Yes, political parties will claim there are ideologies, which you hate to hear, conviction. That ideally should have been the driving seat. That's the only reason a voter would choose between one party and the other. But over the years, and I make bold to blame the military, because the era you define, where the free period where intellectualism was applied into politics, but the military gave us a system of survival of the fittest. Anything goes. People didn't think about certain processes, procedures, ideas, and how to get at it. It is about who can grab what, how, and when. That's actually what has changed the politics. But I still believe there are today parties in Nigeria that are still ideologically based. You talked about NEPO. Don't forget that NEPO is what has brought the current party you call the PRP today. It's about the oldest party in Nigeria today. PRP still exists. Before we entered the studio, I told you about my party, the National Rescue Movement. The word rescue is because we realize that we are moving away from a competitive politics, which is ideally what we should have been offering to the electorate. That we now see there's a need to say, hey, hold on, let's rescue this party, this country from where it's moving away, and which is what has brought about the poverty level you find in Nigeria, where Nigeria has become the poverty capital of Nigeria, where insecurity is all over the place, where our economy is. I grew up at a point where my father bought a brand new car for 3,000 something naira, brand new Peugeot car for 3,500 naira.
I moved into Niteko.
I shared with my son a few days ago the flight race to go to England. And he was like, are you kidding me? In the same country. So the idea of now rescuing Nigeria became our own way to deal with the lack of competition in politics by giving to Nigerians what we call the new phase of Nigeria, how we think Nigeria can be run. But unfortunately, because of the militarization of the political system, even the Nigerians have also been affected too, that you find people who will tell you, give me my own now. I don't know whether you've gone to run election anywhere in the country. You discover that the problem is not even only about the politicians, even the Nigerians.
The electorate themselves.
The electorate themselves have also become part of this anything goes. So what my party want to do, sir, if you give us the opportunity, is to now redefine Nigeria and tell you that a country can be run based on rules, based on laws, based on ideas.
I will come to your party and those other parties that think they want to reinvent or at least bring back the good old days. I'm being careful not to make this conversation about defections. Belonging to a political party, to me, should be belonging to conviction and conscience.
That's correct.
And when you choose to belong to a party, it means that party has the driving principles and thoughts and the hows and wherefores that you agree with, that you buy into.
Absolutely.
But when you move like a herd from one party this morning, and permit me to name names. A few days back, the former governor of Delta State, Dr. Kowa, his former deputy, the entire government of Delta State moved from PDP to APC. The governor of Akwa Ibom State, has hinted that the aircraft in which he is has developed fault and is likely to join Air Peace for his next flight. The national chairman of APC, Ganduje, had told us to look out. A minimum of 4 governors from the PDP were going to change to APC. Is that belonging to a political party out of conviction and conscience?
You see, that's actually the thing I talk about. Now, what you probably have now is persons who want to be part of government, not minding whether the idea of the government moves away from, because obviously if someone was in APC yesterday and wants to join PDP today, means that there's something in PDP has seen or APC has seen that is not what, that is more attractive than what he believes in. That shows that from the beginning there was no conviction. I am of the opinion that what you find today is people who want to capture state, who want to be relevant, who want to be part of the system, and who don't care what the idea is for as long as their personal interest is presented. My major concern about it is that it's unfortunate that electorates will vote for you based on what you call conviction, based on maybe the ideas you would have sold to them, and now that idea is based on ideology A, and you're not carrying their mandate to ideology B, which is not sold to them. Absolutely. So I think that that's one of the problems of our party. Yes, our constitution had tried to provide for, in the constitution, what happens if that were to be done by the legislator, in which case you lose your seat, but very silent on what happens if an executive, which is those lopsidedness that we need to deal with. I have advocated there should be a constitutional amendment that makes it possible that once you vacate the position, your political party, that persons have voted for you on the basis of what they call convention to something different, you should be able to leave that seat so that you can now go and compete. Because what I find is not because it's more like a survival that they do. It is not because they are convinced that where they're going to is better than where they're coming from. So that is part of the problem. Like I said, look at the number of persons who you said join in the hood. Is it that all of them got the same conviction at the same time? It is because we have developed a politics where one man stands, and whether he is right or wrong, every other person's join. Where one man no longer boasts of his own vote, but have a collective chain of votes. Because how did they get there? They got there. You've seen cases where someone buys the form for all the legislators. You've seen the cases where one person
on television,
exactly, where somebody sits down in a bedroom and tell you
determines who becomes what.
So that's the challenge, and which is why I think the problem of conviction has a problem in our politics. But like I said in an interview I granted recently, Nigerians should not worry about it. The reason is that the population that you talk about, the political class today, is less than 3% of our population. So if all of us political class decide to go and jump in one ship, Nigerians that have the power, because in a democracy, power actually belongs to the people. If Nigerians can sit back and say, oh, is that what you want to do? Our fate should be in our own hands. We are going to find a national rescue movement whose idea is consistent with what we think, and all of us vote him. You can go with your 3% and that 97% will be here. But unfortunately,
yes,
I think also that we need to talk to ourselves in Nigeria. The problem of the country today is the elites. They're nonchalant, non-committed, they feel that they're not concerned. But of course, many of us are becoming the victim today because we have now lost what we used to call middle class before. The middle class today are the poor Nigerians. So I believe that 2027 will give them opportunity to think and mobilize the mass public. Let's teach the political class a lesson that power still belongs to the people.
Who should be mobilizing? The political parties.
Absolutely.
Who should be telling the story of Nigeria's experience and providing alternatives? The political parties.
Absolutely.
Chinedu, are there political parties in Nigeria?
We have 19 political parties in Nigeria.
Do you see them as political parties?
They are actually political parties, but you see, the same problem I defined earlier is actually what makes it look as if these parties don't exist.
I disagree with you that they are political parties. And let me tell you why I tend to wonder whether indeed there are political parties in Nigeria. During the Babangida era, the military made an effort, a failed effort, to establish two political
SDP
parties,
and NRC.
SDP and NRC.
A little to the left, a little to the right.
Of course, the civilian population would not brook that nonsense, because all the argument in universities, within Nigerian Labour Congress, within the media, all the argument was that political parties are evolutionary organs. You don't decree them. People come together, think, determine where they want to go, aggregate, register, begin to evolve by selling their conviction to the electorate. So our people Nigeria rejected both things. When the military crashed out in that misadventure and they were to exit, a party, a so-called political party, a behemoth emerged called People's Democratic Party. But please listen to me. Who were members of the People's Democratic Party? Elements of MPC, elements of NCNC, elements of Action Group, elements of NEPO, elements of various political parties, real political parties, but who were now shepherded and funded from behind by the military. I hope Nigerians know that PDP was a creation, a vehicle, a purpose vehicle created by the military to hand over power. And they do that. And we were told that was a political party. That was a command and control structure. And that was why when the Kwemes and co tried to infuse real political thought into PDP, of course the military from behind made sure that one of theirs became the candidate. Ekweme was roundly disgraced at the George Township Stadium. What is the difference today? By the way, who are the elements making up the APC? The same horde that was put together by the military. Who are those running government across the country? Show the very same people who were rejected under Abacha. They are running the show. Please, is APC a political party? What are its departments? Is PDP a political party? What are its departments? What are they selling to Nigerians? What is the National Rescue Movement? Because I say, you people are not political parties.
Thank you very much. You see, at the beginning, I told you that I join your frustration. There are 19 political parties, no doubt, by registration.
Thank you.
The question is whether they are convinced. Yes, whether they have conviction around what drives them. That is the question. But we have focused more on PDP and APC. For me, there's no difference between PDP and APC, and which is why there's always a jump from those two parties. You discover the movement is usually from those two parties. It's the same one party, but you will be unfair to the retinue of other political parties, including mine, the National Rescue Movement.
Yes.
And let me explain to you what I think is happening now, that with time we'll begin to see the parties. How do you expect these other parties? These are parties that use your state resources, PDP and APC. They are governors, they are president, they are ministers, they are everything. So even when they claim they are not spending our money, they are driving our vehicles. Do you understand? So they are visible even when they are not saying we're here. But these other ones, how do you compete with these elephants when you can't fund political parties? The speaker had come up with something recently that he called political parties bill, that seeks to fund political parties and create a framework for the monitoring. I believe that is when we can begin to say we have political parties that can compete favorably, and not a man who uses national resources versus a man who struggles to sell his ideas. And because I told you that we already have an impoverished society, the society tends to listen more to them because he who pays the piper dictates the tone. Rather than this one, like you asked me about what is the National Rescue Movement want to offer. I told you it's a child of necessity, having realized how a country filled with human resources in large numbers, mineral resources in multiple numbers, cannot develop itself because you have persons who do not have any conviction, that have captured state and run it like their own empire and not for the people. And you know, in a capitalist system, nobody, if you don't have money to buy bread, it's your business. But if you have run a system where the people are the center, every decision around the persons, if you're talking about health, it has to be how it affects the average person. In the real world, when a child is born, a child belongs to the state and not to the father and mother. If that is the mindset, you will begin to think about how would the child go to school? What happens to him? What environment is it going to survive? But when it is about capture an empire where anybody that agrees with you takes part, that's the reason we have a country the way it is. So now one is the pattern from that, giving you a picture of how a society can use its resources under a governance structure where rule of law is obeyed. Today, do you think that if rule of law is in place, the kind of things that you see in Nigeria will happen today? No, it is about a rule of might. Anyone who decides what he wants to do does it. We talked about what happened in River State recently. A man elected by a people can be sacked by another person elected by the same people. Many of us don't think that was what the Constitution envisages in that. We've seen cases in this country where even when there is a rule, emergency rule, the government is still allowed to be there. So there are so many things you find in the system today that.
But wait, Prince. I was going to query I was going to mention two people, and I will still mention them. The Senate President, Godswill Akpabio, is a senator of the Federal Republic, against all the rules in the books, against all the laws in the land. One, by the provisions of the Electoral Act, having run and conclusively run and failed in a bid to become a presidential candidate. He should have just licked his wound and gone home and begin to plan his next outing. Ahmed Lawan, having also committed the same, threw his heart in the ring and lost. However, apart from fouling the Electoral Act, they were able to capture the judiciary that gave them legal endorsement to their impunity and illegality. And today, against all rules in the land, all rules in the books, they are in the Senate using an illegal route to preside over the legislative affairs of the country. I'm coming. In the First Republic, the opposition party will wait for you to file the rule. They won't attempt to capture the institution. They wait for you to file the rule, and they go to court and show you that you're a lawbreaker, and by rules of the game, lawbreakers are not allowed, and you're off the ballot. Meanwhile, the National Rescue Movement and its other collective 16, 18 political parties have just said, that's how it used to be, or that's how it ought to be. When it is our turn, we will also file the rules and become Senate President.
Yeah, Chief.
So how can the parties grow?
Chief, what you said here now, you mentioned the courts. It was someone that complained and went to court.
He went to court, captured the court.
Yes, if nobody did anything, I would have agreed with you that the opposition failed. Someone went to court to say this is wrong. The highest court in the land gave judicial approval to it. So who are we to challenge the Supreme Court of the Federal Republic of Nigeria? I think the part of our problems again is the institutional culture. I've followed INEC's ability in this country to give you real electoral reforms, starting from Jega. Remember when Jega came with the card reader?
Yeah.
Mahmoud came and even advanced it to beavers. If you see clearly that the number you used to hear voters in Kebbi, 5 billion, you no longer find those kind of numbers.
6 million.
Now, but guess what? Sometimes I even look at INEC, I pity them. INEC, yes, they should take responsibility because they conduct the election. But don't forget, there are so many other persons that are working with them. They are only the election manager. They have the security angle, they have the logistics angle. Tell me what an INEC officer would do when there's an insecurity situation where he cannot deal with the security himself. So there are so many sides to this. There's a state capture until our institutions are very strong, independent, that they can take positions. We'll continue to have this kind of power where one man sits and even like what everybody sees in our country today. We've lost faith in most of the institutions. But I have always told everyone that the last election shows clearly that we can do things differently. Before the election, sir, no average politician would have believed that the Labour Party, driven by P2B's, would have won one state. But you found that Okada riders in states like Kaduna
One election
on the basis of that wave. What does that tell us? That you might think INEC didn't do it because maybe your expectation on one side didn't. But this picture I painted now will show you that the way we see this, for as long as we continue our electoral reforms, we may find it way, if Nigerians, because the whole thing still boils down to Nigerians, if every Nigerian today wakes up to say enough of this rubbish, we can get it right. Let's wait for them. What my party calls voters' revolution. Not revolution by fighting, carrying arms. No, revolution with the ballot. Take up your vote on the election. Make sure you get, of course, thank God INEC is going to do away with PVC, because with beavers now, you don't need that paper. Or you just need to go to the polling units where you're registered, say your name. Once your biometrics can interpret your name, you vote. So that, I hope, will encourage a lot of Nigerians to go and vote. We're still pushing to see if we can find an electronic system that will make it a lot more easier so that Nigerians can fully vote. If we do, we can change our country. The power still belongs to the people, but the people will need to realize that the power is in their hand. So the question of whose job is it to sensitize the people is a collective responsibility. The political parties, of course, Nigerians who are the victims of the situation, When you are put in a place where you're not comfortable, what do? You resit. So I think Nigerians, this is the opportunity for them to resit, because whatever you sow is
that
what
you shall reap. Now, Chinedu, you are speaking from the point of understanding of even the impact and import of policies on your own life. But I went to a church, and the priest was with considerable authority saying that in this church they will bind and cast out the spirit of poverty. They will bind and cast into the abyss the spirit of hopelessness, and that they will create open doors no matter what Chinedu and his ilk do. In other words, there are those being told clearly that your problem can be solved from heaven. As I was coming to the studio this morning, I saw some very young little boys between the ages of 7 and 15 who were heading to work. They were headed, they had their plates in their hands. They were going to beg for alms. Because also somebody has convinced them that Allah has put out some who will help them out, and that's how they will live their lives and become true people. And you are in this studio this morning telling me that the people will use their votes and this, when they have been told that their gutter status is a divine order. How do you tackle that?
I think the picture you painted is one of the problems of colonization. The British, when they came here, came with missionaries who, as they were busy doing their business, they were giving you palliative that gives you a pie in the sky, and that hasn't left. I was in China last year. I didn't see one church.
Just let me abridge you, I hope you don't mind. On Christmas Day, my eldest son, who's a lecturer, was in China. He went for an exchange. And I called him and said, "Superstar, how is the holiday today?" He said, "Which holiday?" I said, "Christmas holiday." He said, "Nobody is talking about it."
Sir, I was coming there. I did not see one church. I did not see one mosque. I saw a people who believe that whatever you sow is what you reap. So the deceit which religion had done to us is part of the problem. Somebody is, you want to be a lawyer, you won't want to go to school. you want to be a billionaire and you don't have any value.
The girl who refused to write her
jam, thinking that God will write it.
Told her that God was going to write it.
So these are illusions, these are misconceptions, these are deceits that have been sold in the system.
You know I'm bringing this up because National Rescue Movement, People's Redemption Party, the 16 political parties that ought to bring alternative, because the two main political parties are also telling the electorate that God is on the throne deciding matters, whereas it is not true. They are on the throne fouling matters.
You've heard me tell you here, that is what you sow that you reap. That was what I said here. You would not expect that manna, when manna used to fall, I think it was even in Israel that it fell. Okay, even if it fell, it was in Israel. It didn't fall here. So we would need to reorientate our people to know that you will never get anything you have never worked for unless you want to be a thief.
Okay, let me draw from experience and then begin to let us. My producer had asked me, how long are you going to stay? I said, we have much to talk about, okay, but let us begin to address certain issues. Prince, once upon a time, People's Redemption Party was going to the universities. Once upon a time in this country, the anti-apartheid movement was going to the universities. Once upon a time, the action group was going to primary schools and secondary schools. Those parties were explaining the national situation, were explaining the alternative to national situation, were selling characters and integrity of candidates, were selling the ideologies of the political parties. I think in this conversation, I've told you that what we hear is we will capture Anambra State in the next election. We will deliver Rivers State in the next election. In other words, the electorate counts as not. If not, the parties will go to convince the children, they convince the electorate. Now, when we begin to address the weaknesses of this absence of competitive politics in Nigeria, where do you want to begin from? Your party.
Well, I as a student in the university, I joined the National Conscience Party, the Ganify of Me concepts. We believe that that's also a good way to catch them young. My party has strategies like that. The challenge is being the resource mobilization to have this done. And remember, I talked about the bill that seeks to now support political parties funding wise will be one of the best things we can achieve in this administration if we're able to pass that, because these other ones that we can capture Anambra, they say it because they know they have the wherewithal. Today in some elections you hear that votes are sold for as much as 20,000, 50,000. So if a party feels how many voters are in Anambra, the 4 million of them, okay, times 20,000, he can make such boast. I will be unable to make that boast. I can only say based on conviction of the value I need to sell. But the question in a poverty-driven country is that how much Trenchy would be able to put food for the man who is looking for food to eat at that moment. This is where we keep saying the 20,000 you collect thinking is money can only feed you for a day. The time to say no to 20,000 is now, so that you can have a liberated future rather than the immediate gratification that this other person's.
I picked up my glasses and I looked at something and I said, I will draw your attention to it. I put this down, taking the structure of action group. There was the Department of Ideological Engagement in that party. There was the Department for Organization in that party. There was the Department for Finance, Membership and Finance in that party. There was the Department of Mobilization. And then there was the shadow government, which included the economic team, international relations, security, and all that. These departments were a clear indication that the political party knew what needed to be interrogated, and therefore were bringing in men of knowledge, intellect, and experience to begin to synthesize alternatives to what the government at that time was doing. And those things were what the government saying to the students in the universities, to the electorate, to primary school students. Let me tell you, in 1956, Action Group came to my primary school. They came with bags of powdered milk from Russia. And the NCNC Eastern Nigeria felt that that was a clincher, a game changer. The NCNC spread a rumor that Awolowo had entered Eastern Nigeria with poisoned powdered milk for Russia. And do not forget that in those days when we were praying in primary school, we say we pray for those who do not know God, that God should establish his presence amongst them.
And Russia was,
and we started missioning Russia.
Russia was.
So the moment NCNC said that the milk came from Russia and propaganda, it resonated. Our grandmothers, our grandfathers sped to the primary schools and spirited all of us away. But Chinedu, that is a story. But Action Group had a department that sat down and thought, what do we do? Let us improve, practically touch the health of the people and tell them that a government is capable of touching your health without taking your money. Please, Chinedu, National Rescue Movement, let me just narrow it very quickly so that we can, and parties like yours, in trying to create alternatives and create competition in Nigerian politics. Do you have this department? Because we're complaining about money. When I was a member of PRP, we were contributing money. We had a membership card and we had our monthly dues. Chukwumerija, in which magazine I worked in Pangrove in Lagos, it was a contribution. Today, there are owners of political parties, not a mass movement. Yours is a movement. What are you doing to absolutely make it a people's movement?
Absolutely. My happiness is that you have very vast experience in this subject matter. What PDP and APC did to Nigerian politics is that they made politics move away from payment of dues. Naturally, how political parties raise money is monthly dues, registration fees. Now, what you find is that someone sits somewhere
and donates 400 million.
So they no longer go for that. What do you do in National Rescue Movement? If our party is really party today, if you go online and put www.nrm and say register, you have provision for your dues, provision for you to register as a member. This is the way we raise our money. Our party is not the one you now think that one man brings 1 billion from there. So what we're trying, these are actually moves that we're taking to show that we're actually a distinct political party, where you are a stakeholder in the political party and not where one man owns the party and you're just
a joiner,
if you like. So that's what we're trying to do. Then we also have the departments you mentioned there. We have them. In fact, we just created a department for FCT with basically more than the committees you have, the mobilization, contact, ideology, and all that goes around. In fact, anytime the other week we'll be going to sell the logo of our party is the bee. And many people have said, why bee? They forget that the bee is the one that produces the honey. We're going around to share honey because that's our party is promising Nigeria that that land,
good land
that has been promised to us, and the good times up there if all of us work to belong to it. Where we no longer promise you that one man owns the party and then we'll give you 1 billion. We're saying contribute and be part of this so that you too can have the conscience and voice to say, this is what I want done in my party. This is how our party should be run, unlike what we have in the parties that we've mentioned earlier.
Well, in the past almost 55 minutes, I've been conversing with Prince Chinedu Obi. Well, my producer says about 54 minutes. We've been talking about party politics, but looking at it from competitive politics, and we define competitive politics, where the political parties have things different they offer the electorate and gives the electorate a chance to make a choice. And in making that choice, the electorate determines that this is what is good for me and not being captured. I have used some words here which I'm not withdrawing them, but I think they are strong, but INEC is a captured institution. Police is a captured institution. The processes, the courts are captured institutions. So the campaign becomes, look, let me join those with the power to capture so that I can be in power. The effort to convince the electorate becomes a second consideration.
Yeah.
But he says that the answer to the situation is also addressing the young people, making the political parties to be driven by conviction and value, and sustaining the political parties not by one man with one deep pocket, but making it a mass movement where people collectively own the party. Chinedu,
Chef.
I hope I didn't turn you to a guinea pig.
No. I told you we suffer the same frustration.
Convicted.
We're suffering from the same situation, and any right-thinking Nigerian needs to think this way. This is the only country we have. Every day you find Nigerians wanting to run to Europe, America, including our leaders. Those countries were built by human beings. They were not built by, and the only way they did it was there was a conviction. In America, you have the Democrats, we know what they believe in. We have Republicans, we know what they believe. The China I told you I'm coming from, yes, had even agreed that one party will rule, CPC. Yeah. You know, they have other political parties, but they believe for the leadership at the higher level should be the CPC. The first few days in China, I was quarreling with them. I called that selective democracy. In fact, it was a serious engagement with some of their professors, and at the end of the day, I realized that everything is Chinese characteristics in the new era. So, people-centered. China said it is not a developed country. It can only be a developed country when the last city, when the last village is as developed as Beijing. That for me is very ambitious, and that shows where people-centered governance is in place. That's what I think Nigerian leaders should begin to think about. When was it? In 1946, Chairman Mao came with his guys, sat down, we can move away from this rubbish that we've done. The same experience we had here. In their own case, 10,000 British soldiers went and destroyed that place. So go to the same China today, you will never believe that that is a city on planet Earth. If you ask me, I've gone around, but I can assure you that China will lead the world in our generation.
China is in fact leading the world.
In our generation.
America is scrambling. America is scrambling.
And guess what? China does not have the kind of resources we have in Nigeria.
Thank you, Chinedu. Today is May 1. This conversation will be incomplete without just devoting some 2 minutes to the Nigerian worker, the Nigerian government policies, and where those policies have kept the Nigerian worker. And as the chairman of the National Rescue Movement, one of your responsibilities is to keep monitoring policies and their effect and impact on the citizens, and begin to tinker with alternatives. What are the better options? On this May 1, when the Nigerian worker is likely to be out there parading. And their leaders speaking in high tones of the sufferings of the worker, what do you have to say to the Nigerian worker?
Let me congratulate Nigerian workers that they are still alive today, bearing the environment and economic situation with 70,000 naira minimum wage. I'm not sure whether that money has been paid.
20 states have not paid.
But even if that money has been paid, a bag of rice today is more than 100,000. So I don't know how the civil servants or public officers survive in the country. But then maybe some of them are these people who have been told to have their hope. Like teachers in those days, they will say their reward is in heaven. I pray that you begin to have your reward here. As public officers, you also have a role to change this system, because I can assure you that no money is stolen in government if a public officer is not part of it. So check our budgets across board. You see provision for television last year, provision for cars this year. So I challenge the public officers to also realize that this is a vicious circle. Whatever you do wrong can come around to haunt you. So while I wish them well, I challenge them to begin to also join the new conversation for a new Nigeria, where they can be sure that their salary can take them home.
Well, the Nigerian worker, happy workers day so that your salaries can take you home. But if you steal part of the money meant for salaries, you leave some of your colleagues without money to even get home.
True.
That is truth. and you ride big cars, and when you retire, you are celebrated as having had a successful career. But we have left skeletons behind and corpses in the valley of the civil service. That would not be wonderful, will it? But I wish all of us will work, as I'm a worker. I've always worked. I love work, but I love reward for my work.
That's correct.
Chinedu,
My pleasure once again. Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, Nigerians, for listening to us. And I would love to be here again.
Thank you very much. Of course, can I assure you that you will return here as politics speak up. I will challenge him again whether really this conversation is going to affect the way they do things and the way they challenge the other political parties and begin to create alternatives to all that they're offering. For this morning, my name never changes. This is Mwabozen Joko from Abuja. It's Good Morning Nigeria, and thank you, and invest your time for the rest of the day. Good morning.